What's going on, guys? It's Kevin here. If you or a friend want to get into Chronicles of Arcane for only $20, this is going to be the deck for you. This deck only uses bulk and one water ancient to play the game, and you can start having fun with the game, give it a shot, or even win some games in multiplayer or a casual environment. I've been working on this deck for a while now, and I've tested it against a new player and with a new player, and it plays well, it's super fun, and it honestly can even compete with some of the metagame decks if you know what you're doing. This deck is sea creature aggro, and like I said, it only uses commons, uncommons, and the water ancient, which you can get only from the booster box. I built this deck because right now, as of this moment, there are no starter decks available for Chronicles of Arcane that you can pick up, which is pretty big if you want to try playing the game on a budget if you're a new player, or if you don't have like say $50 to spend on cards right now. So all you need to do is find someone who has a lot of bulk and get yourself one water ancient as a hollow version, and you can get those cards for about $10-15 right now in the market, the bulk being like $5 or even free depending on where you look, and you'll be good to go to play this deck. This deck is real easy to build. All you need is 6 Coral Guardians, 4 Sea Serpents, 4 Trench Lurkers, 3 Sea Witch, of course your Water Ancient, Lake of Beginnings, 5 Submerged, 3 Arcane Bolt, 2 Frostwave Surge, 2 Dispel Magic, and 11 Water Essence. And if you want, from Nyxarian War, you can get yourself a Frenzy of Sharks token. So I'll be giving a quick breakdown of how the cards work in the deck, and then I'll be showing you some gameplay and example hands you want to look for in Tabletop Simulator. So obviously we have your Lake of Beginnings. This ancient again only costs $10 to $15 as a full hollow, and in my opinion it is the best ancient in the game, right below the Foundry Ancient, because everyone knows the Foundry Ancient is a little bit overpowered right now, but Lake of Beginnings is still really good. This bad boy makes 1 water essence at the start of your turn, and the key thing is it basically creates a permanent attack or life buff +1 either or on your creatures, and that is the whole basis of the entire deck. This entire deck is going to be relying on buffing up your sea creatures, making them really big, really tanky, deal a lot of damage, and just scale super hard. And this Lake of Beginnings is how we're going to do that. The MVP of the deck is of course our Coral Guardians. When this bad boy dies, you may send it to the Abyss, aka the Purge Zone in this game, and you can give a creature 1 extra life. But if that creature is a sea creature, which hint hint, almost every creature in the deck is a sea creature, that creature is going to get +1/+1. And when you combine that with your Lake of Beginnings, you can give a creature 2/1 as a bonus or a 1/2 bonus instead, which means if this guy dies, you can give another Coral Guardian, for instance, 2 extra attack and 1 extra life after 1 Coral Guardian dies. Guys, that is so good scaling in this game, and that allows you to win games easy peasy, especially if they have no removal. The second MVP of this deck is the Sea Serpent. Guys, this is a sleeper, underrated creature in Chronicles of Arcane. It is the only creature in the game with haste and preemptive strike, which is the same thing as first strike and in Magic the Gathering if you don't know how to play this game yet. And it's a 1/1. The only problem with this guy is it is so squishy. It dies to arcane bolts, it dies to any kind of ping damage, but that's okay. The goal of the deck is to get this guy buffed up. You want to get your Coral Guardians out on turn 1 and just start buffing this guy up. Buff that attack up. This guy can one-shot Mire Stalkers easy peasy with preemptive strike and not even die. So you can get so much value by just buffing up your Sea Serpents and just hitting to their Mire Stalkers or any other tanky creature once you get this guy to 4 attack power or higher, which is really easy to do. If you get out 2 Coral Guardians on your first turn and you sack them into their creatures, you can get this guy up 4 extra attack and 2 extra life because each core guardian is giving 2/1 with the Lake of Beginnings buff. So this guy can become a 5/3 on turn 2. No problem, easy peasy. And you can just start wrecking games with this aggro deck. Next creature we have is Trench Lurker. Guys, this is another underrated card in this game, and you should be playing this creature in your metagame decks as well. It is the only trap stealth creature we have in the game, at least to my knowledge, and it has solid stats for a 3 cost of 3/2. You can use this creature in 2 main ways. The first way is to use it as a removal trap. If they throw in any creature with 3 life or lower and they are attacking you, just throw this guy in their turn and it acts as a removal spell, no problem. You can also use this guy to close out games. Just play this guy in your turn. It has stealth. They can't attack it unless they have that orb card, which everyone hates right now. And you can just take out easy little 3 life or less creatures, or you can just swing to their face and end games, because 3 attack in Koa right now is really good. Okay, Sea Witch. Sea Witch is one of our only, I think it's the only non-sea creature we have in a whole deck, but she is so good. She is super metagame, and it helps that she is an uncommon card. She has reach. We don't really care about reach for her in this deck. The effect we want from her is Ocean's Call. Now, it doesn't say in the card, but Frenzy of Shark tokens, those tokens are actually sea creatures, so they work with our Coral Guardian buffs, which is huge to make those Frenzy of Shark tokens scale really hard. Additionally, her extra bonus of the +1/+1 works with Lake of Beginnings, so you can make your Frenzy of Sharks tokens a 4/3 with 1 extra buff. So if your Coral Guardians get destroyed early on, you have Sea Witch for infinite scaling in this deck. And she's pretty consistent too, with only being 3 copies per deck. Super good card. Our next way to buff up our sea creatures in a deck is Submerged. Guys, this is another sleeper card we need to see water players playing a lot more. Just like Coral Guardians, this thing can make all your sea creatures a 2/1 because of Lake of Beginnings. And if that's not good enough, this thing can be a removal against weak 1/1 creatures or any creature with 1 life on it because of its other effect. The one thing to note is this card is not very good in a mirror matchup with other water decks because it only buffs up water essence creatures. But against a water versus any other matchup, fire, void, forest, or air, this card is so good as a removal spell. Typically in this deck, you want to be buffing up your Sea Serpents or Frenzy of Shark tokens with Submerged or with your Coral Guardians, and you'll be good to go. Guys, I do want to make one more note about Submerged here, and that is the buffing of it. So Submerge actually lasts for 3 turns. It lasts for the turn you play it, it lasts on the opponent's next turn, and it also lasts on your turn again because it says until the end of your next turn. So it's important to remember that Submerge is a temporary bonus that lasts for 3 turns. However, the buff from the Lake of Beginnings is a permanent bonus, so you may need to keep track of your Submerged buffs separately from your permanent buffs from Lake of Beginnings. It can be a little confusing at first. I recommend putting Submerged, say, in the resolution zone of your play area until 3 turns have passed, and that way you won't lose track of the buffs coming from it. So just know that factor about Submerged. We got 3 arcane bolts here for some ping damage. Use it to take out some annoying creatures, but typically we're going to be using it to attack players to deal some easy 1 damage pings and also to draw some cards. We have Frostwave Surge. Guys, this card is so good. In my opinion, it's worthy to be a gold card because of how good it is. This card essentially exhausts or taps creatures or artifacts for 2 turns. The turn you play it and the turn on your opponent's turn. So you can lock down their board, lock down their defenders like Mire Stalkers, and just keep going for face. You can also lock down their creatures when they're about to attack you and keep your creatures alive. Guys, this card is ridiculously good. You gotta play this card in your water decks, metagame or budget. Next card we have is Dispel Magic. Of course, really staple card. Use it to counter whatever that comes your way. And this deck is really good for Dispel Magic because honestly, all the cards we have are super high value already. We can just drop in 2 Dispel Magics and we're good to go. Ideally, you want to counter their spells that remove your big boys, any kind of removal spell like Mind Control that can go on your Sea Serpents. You want to just make sure that you're saving Dispel Magic to keep your big boys alive, or any board wipes that may also come your way. And this is not really a card in the deck, but if you have access to an Ixarian War, try to get yourself a Frenzy of Sharks token, just for the look of it, and also to show people that your Frenzy of Sharks token is a sea creature, because it is a sea creature. So, very good. Okay, so now that we know the deck, we're going to talk about some example hands and initial gameplay that you can expect to see when playing sea creatures aggro. I'm going to draw 7 cards on my TTS board setup here, and this is an example of a common hand that you're probably going to see when playing this deck. We got a few Water Essence, maybe 1 to 3 ideally, and we have a Coral Guardian. We want to have about 2 of these Coral Guardians usually, so that way we can set up some pretty good tempo plays on turn number 2. It's usually good to see Submerged also, just to have some early game control, or to start ramping up our Sea Serpent or Shark tokens. And in this example hand, we do have a Sea Witch. We won't always get a Sea Witch in our first hand, but it can be good to get a Sea Witch so we can start scaling up. In this example, we're going to assume we're first player. As first player of a Koa game, we're not going to draw on the first turn. We're going to play a Water Essence for turn, and in this scenario, if I do have a Sea Witch, I think I will play a Sea Witch as first player. Now, it's good to play your Sea Witch in the back row. Typically, we want to have the Shark tokens up in the front row over here. This is because the front row creatures, like the Shark token, will prevent the Sea Witch from being attacked by enemy creatures, because front row creatures automatically protect back row creatures. A common mistake you may see in this deck is playing the Sea Serpent on the first turn instead of the Sea Witch or any other cards. If there's one mistake you don't want to make in this deck, it is to not play a Sea Serpent unless you are going to buff it up with Submerged or Coral Guardian. Trust me guys, in this metagame, it's super easy to get pinged out by a Arcane Bolt or any other kind of removal spell in the game. It takes 1 damage to kill this guy. The only scenario we want to get out our Sea Serpent on its own without being buffed is against certain cards that we can trade into for free, like a Lava Elemental, which will give us an easy trade for the cost. So basically, never play a Sea Serpent on its own unless you're going to get a favorable trade right away. Okay, so example turn number 2. If we have turn number 2, if they don't kill our Sea Witch, we're going to go and ramp it up like so. We can go and exhaust our Lake of Beginnings here, or just use the generator keyword rather, and get out our Shark token in the front row, exhaust it as a 2/2. It's very important to note, you should try to prioritize using your generator essence instead of your essence cards, because generator only works on your turn, and if we have a trap card in our hand like this Dispel Magic, we want to have our water essence available to use for our trap cards. In this scenario here, after we started to scale up, we can go and play a Coral Guardian, or we can go and just use Submerge also right afterwards. We can use Submerged on any weak creatures they have, take it out, or we could even, if you want to, get that trade in with the Sea Serpent. We could also just save our Water Essence for their opponent's turn if we think they're going to play a really strong spell, and just use Dispel Magic on any spells they have. However, typically in this deck, we want to try to be proactive rather than reactive. Being proactive is typically the way to play if you want to apply a lot of pressure and win games. Last note I'm going to make, it's usually a good habit to play your creatures diagonally in terms of their positioning, like so. As an example, I'll kind of set it up on the board right now with some Sea Witches. This is how you typically want to go and play your board states. The reason we would like diagonal placement, it doesn't hinder any of our creatures from attacking because each column has no creatures blocking each other, and additionally it makes us not prone to being destroyed by some removal spells with adjacent effects like you see with fire and fireballs, or air and storm surge. Overall, that is a general idea of how to play this deck in the early game. And last thing I'll say is the best hand you could have in this deck in general looks like this. It looks like 2 Coral Guardians, 1 Water Essence, and a Sea Serpent. If you see this type of hand, definitely keep it, as it is very powerful. Being able to get out 2 Coral Guardians on your first turn, followed up by a Sea Serpent and sacking the Coral Guardians for those bonuses, will give you a 5/3 Sea Serpent and can arguably win you the game just off that combo. Okay, that's it for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this budget deck list. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments below. I'll be sure to answer any of them. Please like it if you like it, or dislike it if you don't. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Peace.